today I'm going to show two techniques for slab building. The first one is making a flat slab. So we start with a well-wedged piece of clay. We'll need some clay, we'll need some canvas, and we'll need a rolling pin. And then maybe it'd be helpful to have 2 sticks of wood, 1/4 inch or so we can gauge the thickness. So the easiest way to do it is pound out the slab as best you can. This is a way you can make a slab where you don't need anything but a rolling pin. If you're in the studio, naturally you can use a slab roller. So what I want to do is I want to flatten this out as much as I possibly can on a porous surface like wood. This will not work well on Formica because it's going to stick, so it has to be wood. So I used to make pizza years ago. Okay. All right, so every time I do this reminds me of that. All right. All right, so I've done this as much, just to the point where it's going to tear. So I've actually got that. It's not bad. So I flattened it out and I stretched it, and it's just, I'm not putting this flat down. I'm kind of dragging it a little bit. So it's okay, but that's as much as I can do without it tearing. And then I'm going to take it. I'm going to put it on the canvas. And then I can finish the job. So I'll have everybody if we work online, everybody will be required to get a piece of canvas at Art Coop. Next, I'm going to take these 2 pieces of stick, these 2 stirring sticks. You can get these at Menards. I'm not even going to give you free. I'm going to take these and roll these, and I will have a uniform thickness slab. Just keep doing this. This will work. You can also do this with a smaller rolling pin. Just takes a little more effort. Okay, but really what I want is a strip. If I'm making cups or tumblers, I only need a strip, let's say 6 inches, a 6-inch strip. And even for this, you probably get away with just a strip. It doesn't need to be that thick. So an easier way of doing it would be just to cut it, maybe cut it, put the strips back, fold it again, a PVC pipe would work even. Any kind of rolling utensil will do this. Okay, so that's a slab. All right, so we talked about, when we're coil building, we talked about different stages of clay. We have plastic, like right out of the barrel, this is plastic. And if the clay dries a little bit, it becomes leather hard, right? Big difference, right? So if this is a wet piece of clay, so look at the difference, cut out the same slab. See the difference? So that's what we wanted. But if it changes color, it's going to get too dry. So it's important that it keeps its color, like that dark color. So what I'm going to do is take this slab. You can see it's hard, but not too hard. I'm going to just wet it down just a little bit. Once the slab, like clay gets bone dry, you can't reverse it, so you have to start over. But remember, we don't throw clay out, we can reclaim it. All right, so what I'm going to do is cut this into sections, and there'll be some scrap here. And I'm just holding my fettling knife at an angle, and I'm just cutting it straight through, right? Just like that. And then what I'm going to do is make a modest sized box. Let's say Let's try 3.5 inches maybe. So if I want to make a strip that's even, I just take the strip and I just use that same measurement. So if that's 3.5, I do the same thing again, 3.5 again. Actually, I think I'm going to get a little, just to make it cleaner. Okay, let's start from there. All right, 3.5, 3.5. So I'm going to mark it 3.5. And I'll be in, I'm going to give another demonstration making cylindrical forms like cups, round-lidded containers, and I'll be doing the same measurements for making the strip with that. So I'm not going to use this. This is the part that I want. And what I want to do is, because I didn't cut it all the way here. I want to use part of this for the base. So I think we'll make, the bottom will be kind of rectangular slightly. And so this would be, I would say in terms of building, this piece would be more like a building which is predominantly flat sides with right angles. But it doesn't have to be. So what I'm doing is making the bottom my pot. And just something I can measure or use a right angle. Okay, so there's my bottom. And now what I'm going to do is going to cut another strip. And this is going to be, should have enough here for the whole thing. This will also be 3.5 inches. So I could use a needle tool. The knife just works so much better for this. Okay, so what I've just done is I've cut, what I'm doing now, I'm cutting a strip which is going to be my walls. So each one of these was 4.5, so I'm going to cut. Let's cut 2 pieces. Four and a half. And 3.5. So anything that you have to make a right angle is fine. Okay, so here's my base. So there's two types of joints when you're putting slabs together. One is called a butt joint. That's a butt joint, right? And then the other joint, which is actually stronger, is called a miter joint. The miter joint, you actually cut a 45-degree angle, and so I'm going to show you how to do that. So what I'm going to do is, let's miter. So I'm going to turn these all out, because I want this texture. Ultimately, what's going to happen is, this texture is going to be on the outside, like that. So what I want to do is miter each one of these, and make sure I miter the right direction. So there's a few ways you could do this. One is you take your fettling knife, if you have a good eye, and you just run it along the table, and you make and remember, like, each angle is going in. So I'm using the corner of a table, I'm pressing the knife there, and I'm using it just like a guide. And I'm going to do that to each side. So there's little slabs on the floor. I'm going to pick those up in a second. I don't like getting things on the floor unless I actually have to, but I make sure like when I'm all done here, I'm going to make sure I clean up, because that's going to get ground up. So take that. That can go into the recycling bucket later. All right, so I've got my sides. And like coil building, we want to slip and score. So I'm just going to see how they fit. Pretty good. All right, so I'm going to take these. I'm going to spray these down. Just the minute you take things out of the barrel, they're going to start scoring or start drying. And I'm going to slip and score these. So I want to work on a nice clean surface. This is where this tool pays off in diamonds. And I'm going to score this on 3 sides. And with this, it's actually good to put extra slip on. You'll see why, because that extra slip will ooze out when you put this together, and then you can run your finger or brush on the inside, and that will fill in the gaps. Works really well. A lot of times when people slab build and they don't score properly, if it gets too dry, it'll crack apart. So it's just, I can't emphasize how important this is to not let your slab get too dry and to slip and score. And then if it feels a little hard, just spray a little water on it. Okay, so now all the parts, we can put this together now. All right, so when I'm doing this, as I was working, I got slip on my hands. So I want to make sure I keep my hands really clean so I don't get little clay globs, because those clay globs are going to get hard. So if you can do this in a clean way, it's less cleanup And if you're careful with this, you can actually build very, very quickly slab building. So if you think about how long it took me when I was given the coil building demonstration to make a pot and refine it so it was this high, which is about almost 4 inches high, and I did this very, very quickly. The part that took the longest was actually waiting for it to dry. Now, this is pretty basic. You could make a slab pot. Okay, so I'm going to get back. All right, so now I want to push this together. And it's going to have seams, so I'm not going to try blending them too much. I'm just trying to, my goal here is just to kind of get them kind of even. So if you look at the inside here, it's a little bit messy. So what we're going to do is take some of the slip. Remember the soft bristle brush? We're going to take this, and this is a little on the wet side, but it's not bad. We're going to take this, and if I mix this to get all the lumps out, so it's like the spackling compound, I can take this and simply brush this in that and fill in the gaps. So I'm approaching this like a carpenter. I'm thinking of it like an architect too in terms of design. I mean, this is pretty basic, but it's more like a shed. But like a carpenter, I'm using mitered and butt joints. I'm using butt joints, a butt joint to connect the walls with the base, and then miter joints, which I cut at a 45-degree angle, to connect the walls. And I'm just cleaning this up, and I'm just it's a little bit textured, almost like stucco on the inside, but I can clean that up later. But I'm filling in all those cracks on each corner. Okay, so the top here is slightly off. But I'm not going to worry about it right now. Okay, so it's relatively smooth. So now I'm going to put this outside for a few minutes. And then what I'd like to do is make a top for it. And it's possible to make a flat top. I would say as a general rule, it's really hard to make a top which is bigger than, say, 3.5, almost 4 inches. 4 inches would be pushing it where it's going to slump. So I would say, really, you can't make a flat-sided lid bigger than 3.5 inches as a rule. 3.5 inches. Wider than that, it's got to be arched. So I'm going to show you a couple of ways of doing that. One, we take a slab. We'll take the slab that we hand built here. And what we're going to do is just slump that over something. So you could use a bowl. So I'm going to take this, and I guess I could keep it smooth. We'll put a texture on this. So I have a lot of pattern tools here. This is like from a doggy toy. So what I'm going to do is take this. I'm going to make it bigger than it actually is and cut this down. And then I'm going to So it's slightly arched. I'm going to put this outside, and then I'm going to cut this down. So here's another one that I made. I need to arch this. So we could try a different style with this one. So this one, I think what we'll do, we're just going to make a simple arch shape. And we don't need much of it. So we're just going to cut some of this off. And I'm going to put this outside to dry. So this is the slab box I made earlier. I put it outside for a few minutes to let it set up. So I want to make sure all the walls, if my walls are flat, I want to make sure they're flat. Sometimes when you force dry things, things will move. So what I'm going to do is just reinforce those corners a little bit. I'm going to just take my needle tool, score the corners, and I'm going to fill that with just a little bit more clay. Since it's leather hard, it wouldn't hurt, and I want her just to maintain it like that. Just score it. Like I said, these wire scoring tools work really well. All right, so now I'm just going to take a coil of clay, and I'm going to just reinforce, put a tiny coil on the inside, just to reinforce that. That's going to make it a little stronger. It doesn't need to be super thick. I'm just going to run it the length of each corner. Okay, so the next step is I want to clean this up if it needs it. You might be able to use it with a Sureform or a knife. You can use your fettling knife. But if you're in the studio, just take the flat Sureform and you can level this and get this perfectly even and true. But make sure when you're doing it, it's held horizontally, right? Parallel to the ground plane, and you're going in the direction of the length of the wall. Okay, so that's done. I'm just going to go like that, make sure it's level. All right, so now I can think about making a lid on this. So what I did here is I made two lids, shape lids. This one's slightly round. I'm going to cut this down a little bit so I can see it more clearly. I would say a lot of slab pots, when I think about them, I tell students a really good shapes to look at would be buildings, architecture in general. There's some really innovative architecture being done right now. And a lot of it does not necessarily have right angles. I mean, I'm making this with right angles just because people are familiar with that, but this is pretty much flat-sided, but the lid is slightly rounded, so I'm going to cut that some more. I think what we'll do is this here. So what I'd like is, since I'm thinking about architecture, this would be analogous to the eave on a house, where the roof overlaps the walls of the house a little bit. And I'm roughing this out, and I can sure film this later. Okay. So that's roughly what I could do. So now if I want to arch this more, I can take my ball paddle or even something like a tennis ball. And what I'm doing is, as I'm doing this, I'm stretching this out. And the slab is wet enough where it could fit this way. So if I were to use this one, what I would do is I'd get this symmetrical, and then I would turn this over. And I'd outline this so it's even. All right. And then on the inside, I would make another square. And on that square, I would either put slab strips attached to that, so that would act as a locking lip so the pot would not slide off the form. So I'd cut 4 pieces, right, that would go on there, right? Attach that there, and then that would hold it on. All right, so there's this lip, or this lid I have. I've got this one too. You know, that's kind of interesting. But if I kept this, I would do the same thing. This might be a little bit easier if you, ahead of time, like if you knew. So if I were to keep this one, I mean, this could be arched more if I wet this down. And then what I would do is if I kept this, I'd make that shape, and I would make 2 shapes. That were arched, that would go in there, right? So an easy way of doing it is just to work right off the pot. So I'm going to use that as a template. So I would slip and score this. Just marking where I need to. And then I'm just marking where I need to. So I've made this a little larger. This is almost like a barn shape. But so I have this shape, I have this shape. These are 2 types of lids you could use. The main thing is it's not perfectly flat if it's this size or larger. Now from this, again, we're thinking about architecture. you could start to think about other things. So for example, oftentimes a building has a foundation, right? So I could raise this up. I could have feet so they come out. If they pop out, these are going to break, but if they just come out a little bit, it's probably going to be fine. Something like that. You could stack these. If I want to do something to complement that, I could do something to the roof maybe. Where it functions as a lip. I'm not sure about that. Let's try this. See how that looks. We could even, since this would be analogous to a chimney, let's try something different here. But I have to make sure if I'm going to attach this, in the end, I would make sure I slip and score. Okay, but either way, whether I go this way or this way, you know, I choose the shape that makes the most sense.